studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, it's Michael here again from Oilerslive. We're doing Prospect Month now, coming up to the draft, July 23rd. Last week we had Jared Brown on from Draft Pro Hockey. That was fun. And tonight we've got Brandon Holmes on. And Brandon does a lot of different things for a lot of different people, I gather. But I'm happy to have him on because from time to time over the last couple of years, I've seen his name pop up here and there and been following him on Twitter. So I respect the stuff he does. Thanks for joining me tonight, Brandon.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on, Michael. Happy to sit down and have some draft talk with that coming up so soon.
Yeah. So you're first. Let's chat about you, because so my guests get to know you, and they can follow you at bholmes_hockey. It's under his image there. And tell us a bit about you. How long you've been following prospects for? I know you're a Devils fan. For those of you out there, Brandon just recently got married too, and the liner of his of his wedding suit was New Jersey Devils. So that's pretty cool. It
was.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of neat. But tell us a bit about you. How long you've been doing this for?
Well, since I am a Devils fan, you can kind of see me getting interested in the whole prospect scene right as the Devils start going to their, almost 8-year-long rebuild at this point. So kind of getting involved around, 2013, 2014-ish is when I really started to dive in. And really what it came down to is I just had an interest in it. I wanted to get more involved in learning these prospects. And for so many people that are just interested in just writing, I did what I would say anyone should do and just start a blog, just start putting your own stuff out there and have your own opinions, don't take from other places, really watch these players and, put forth what you really believe, is your opinion and such. So I've been doing this since around 2014, 2015 is when I started taking it a little bit more seriously. And I started my own blog over at Riding Pine, and then I was able to write over at Dauber for a little bit, doing their Tampa Bay Lightning prospect coverage. And I was lucky enough last summer to get picked up by Future Considerations in a video scout role, which is what I'm doing right now. We have a great team over there, and that's kind of my story and all of this so far, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. No, and like I said, I mean, I've been following you for a couple of years now. I think it was actually, it's funny because I think it was a World Juniors where I started following you. You were doing these great sort of pregame images. Is that right? Where you'd have who had their prospects playing in each game, like what the lineups were. And so if the Oilers prospects were on there, you'd show, that was you, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that was me. Yeah. I just love that tournament every year. And that was part of what got me so interested in the whole prospect scene, is just watching that tournament every year. And those sheets, I just when I was first getting into it, I would watch these games and I'd be like, who's number 20 on Switzerland? And I have to dig through all these sites to find out who it was. So I was like, what if there's just like a good shorthand for everybody to be able to just look up real quick, like who's playing in this game. So it's something I tried to do for the U20s, the U18s. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, they are helpful. I appreciate them. I appreciate anything like that, and guys like yourself that are doing stuff out there that help us as fans and fans of the league. So no, great stuff. Do you have? I mean, this is a tough question, and one maybe I could have given you some, advance warning for. But do you have like a philosophy around scouting that that you follow? Are there a couple of things that you personally are looking for?
Well, I think year to year, I think your process should always kind of develop a little bit. I think in hindsight, from year to year, there's things where you feel like you may have overlooked certain aspects and prospects, and you kind of learn from that. And but I think my tendency is usually I tend to give a lot of tiebreakers towards faster, more skilled players. And I think just some of the more, I guess, experience with scouting is kind of identifying players that have that higher end hockey sense. So I feel like the more I've grown to watch these players and find out what separates maybe a mid-tier prospect from a real high-end elite prospect is how well they're able to process the game. And I think going into this year, players like a Matty Beniers or Mason McTavish, the way they're able to dictate the pace of play, not only because of skill, but more so how they think the game. I think that's something I've started to see a little bit more in prospects. So I would say a primary emphasis on more speed and skill, but I think hockey sense is one of the hardest things to teach in a prospect. So that's something that I've tried to kind of cover up that blind spot a little bit as I, hopefully am growing and learning as a scout.
Yeah, no, that's great. The other thing, and for those that are listening in or watching in live, Brandon, I've seen his name around. Other people, have a look to see what your rankings are. So obviously, people have a little bit of respect for what you do, and so that's good. That's good to see, and nice to hear that you're continuing to learn the process, because I think there probably is a process, right, into developing and seeing what becomes NHL translatable skills. I'm not, so bear with me as we go into today. I don't take a lot of time watching prospects. I typically, about this time of the year, I'll sort of hone on to folks like yourself and guys around the league and learn from what you've viewed and watched, and then I'll watch a few clips here and there and try to be at least a little bit knowledgeable come draft time in understanding. But what you guys put in the work, so definitely a ton of respect for that. All right, let's chat about, because I asked Jared last week, and I wanted to ask you. I wanted to kind of keep it the same week over week until we get to the draft. What for you this year? What's been your experience? Because it's quite a bit different this year. Obviously, you're a video scout, so you're gonna whether or not you're scouting video, last year or this year is the same, but maybe the amount of video, what things have been different for you this year versus say last year and the year prior?
I think this year the biggest difference is because like I said, like you said, I'm a video scout, so my process in terms of how I watch these players wasn't particularly different. But what was so different was there were just some leagues that weren't playing, or they played a more abbreviated season, and some leagues have their season canceled midway through, like the Swedish juniors. And I think in years past, I've put more emphasis on league play, because you get a larger sample size out of seeing these kids play for their club teams and their home country. But this year, just because of the weird circumstances of the year, there was certain leagues where there was a small sample size or just no sample size at all when you look at a league like the OHL. So I think this year it was a little bit harder to stop recency bias from creeping in a little bit. You go through the year, the Russian kids really start out, rising up your draft board because they're the only ones that are playing, and then Sweden starts up and they start doing the same thing. WHL kicks off, those kids start rising up, and I think this year it was a little bit hard to block out some of that more recency bias in your rankings. But also because of that, I would say more so this year than years past, I took more interest in how these prospects performed at the international best on best type tournaments. So someone like a Mason McTavish, I'll admit, really did rocket up my draft board after his performance at the U18s, because we didn't get to see him much at all in the OHL. He did play a little bit over in Switzerland this year. But seeing how he performed against his peer group on an even playing field for all these kids, I think, at least for me, it took a larger emphasis in my process this year and how I rated these kids against each other.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the toughest part this year, and one of the things that I've noticed as I look at everybody's rankings is they're so diverse versus prior years. I mean, it used to be 1 through 5 was pretty standard among everybody's draft board. You might have one guy has somebody at 2, and one guy has somebody at 3, but I look at you're doing some work for FC Hockey right now, and we talked a bit about it before we started today, but I look at Owen Power being number 6 on the ranking there. He's to go from 1 to 6 on anybody's ranking, right? And he's been number 1 on a number of people's rankings, and that's a pretty big leap, right? So, the real talk is about how you could pretty much throw those sort of I would have said the top 5, but I guess this kind of throws that out the window. You could throw the top 6, maybe top 8 into a blender and decide from there where you have them, just because of the lack of play, right?
Right. Yeah. We were talking a little bit before we went live here that I think that's part of what makes this class a lot more fun than years past, where you don't just have an Alexei Lafreniere, you don't have a Jack Hughes that's just 1-to-1 start to finish. Where this year I think there's a little bit more spirited debate on who is that number 1 prospect, who's a number 6 prospect compared to a number 15 prospect. The consensus just isn't there this year, which I think made the discourse just a lot more open and enjoyable this year, which I thought was nice. And over at FC, I don't think in any of our rankings we had the same number 1 between 2 rankings. We recently just put out our draft guide, and Owen Power actually did jump up to number 1 in that ranking. But
okay.
that was his first time in that slot all year, though.
Yeah.
I believe we started the year with Brandt Clarke as our number 1, then we went to Luke Hughes, and now it's Owen Power. And I think in years past there was a lot of reluctance to really question that number 1 overall slot, whereas this year was a much more open discussion, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And there's just so much diversity in rankings. You have a guy like Fabian Lucel who could be number 1 on someone's board, and then on number 1 he's number 23, which is just a really interesting difference from this year compared to other years.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I find it fascinating, right, to have that kind of divergence, because the other thing though, like as a general manager, when you go up and make that trade call, what that tells me is that nobody's going to be happy with what what you're going to call, right?
Right.
I mean, if the Sabres, I bet you if the Sabres call, Owen Power up, which I suspect that they will. I mean, I see him on enough. He's a big kid that, I've had a chance to watch a little bit of video on him. I'm not, as I said, I'm not ignorant to what's going on out there. I've watched him a little bit. And, that's kind of what I see happening. But if they didn't, you can't really fault them. I mean, there's not much to go on this year. There's a lot of players that could go in that number 1 spot. But as a GM this year, it's going to be, there'd be a lot of fire, insert GM name hashtags this year.
Right.
Not that there isn't every other year. New Jersey Devils, you got at 4. Just curious, while we're talking prospects, what do you think? Because you obviously care about the Devils. Who do you think they're going to take, or who do you think they should take at number 4 if they're available?
Who they will take and who they think they should take, I think is actually aligned this year. I think they should take Luke Hughes if he's available.
Yeah.
And not just because of the Jack Hughes connection. I think he's number 2 on my personal board. I rate him very highly. And I think he's a lot of what the Devils should be looking to add to their team, because everyone knows the Devils need defensemen in that group right there. And I view Luke Hughes at a very similar light to a guy like Shea Theodore, where he can dictate possession and the pace of play with his ability to move the puck, and he might not be as offensively creative as Jack or Quinn, but he can contribute offensively because of his ability to move the puck and distribute the puck in the offensive zone. And I think that's a lot of the same attributes the Devils should be looking to add to their blue line, because if you can get the puck out of your zone onto the sticks of Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, I think that's the way they should look. So if he's there, I think he should be the pick. If he's not, and someone like Seattle or Anaheim steals him away, I think Brandt Clarke would be an awesome backup option for him.
Yeah. Okay. And so talk about Brandt Clarke, because I haven't talked much about this about Brandt Clarke, and he's one of those guys I've seen as high as number 2. And in fact, I think I've seen him even in a couple number 1s here and there. So he's up and down the board. I don't think I've seen him as number 1 for a little while now, but. What are your thoughts on him? I mean, have you had a chance to look at him specifically?
Yeah, he actually started the year as my personal number 1, and then I'd say around December he got knocked down by Owen Power, moved in my number 1 slot, and he stayed there the rest of the way for me. But for Brandt Clarke, I think what you saw him do in the OHL, he was just a very impactful offensive presence on that team, and I think there's a lot that can grow there on the defensive side of the puck. I think there's a lot of awareness and a lot of smarts with how he's able to manipulate space, both in both zones. And I think as he learns that defensive game more, I think he can become a more steady two-way presence. His forte definitely is the offensive side of the puck right now. And I view him a little bit like kind of like a Chris Letang type, where I think he's going to break in as more of a power play specialist and an offensive guy. But I think there's a lot of potential there for him to develop that well-rounded two-way toolkit. I think there's some overall foot speed that he could work on. I really like his agility, but he doesn't have quite the same explosiveness in his stride the way someone like Luke Hughes or even an Owen Power does. So I think those two are separated a little bit because of that component. But the way he thinks the game, especially with the puck on his stick, I think is he's well worth a bet in the top 5 for me.
And so, who do you have? I mean, we talked about Owen Power. Maybe go through. Let's hear your sort of top 5 right now that you see. I know you mentioned to me earlier that it's a work in progress right now, but you think maybe the top sort of maybe the first round for you is set out. Do you have a solid top 5, or do you think that'll change between now and draft day?
My top 5, I would say, is fairly solidified. I don't imagine it moving. I was a little behind because of the wedding planning, and we were on the honeymoon for a week. So
yeah.
I was planning on digging in and doing a lot more video over the past 2 weeks before I fully finalized my list. But my top 5, I would say, is pretty ironclad at this point, with Owen Power at 1, Luke Hughes at 2, Matty Beniers at number 3, Grant Clark at 4, and then William Eklund out of Sweden at number 5.
Okay. And when you go, because it's interesting, your midway rankings. We're gonna kind of jump around a little bit here on the whole topics thing, because your midway rankings, you had Sebastian Costa at 19.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you were to do, have you done any mock drafts yet?
A little bit, like here and there, kind of seeing like where, like just basically seeing how things could shake out. Yeah, I've been keeping my eye on it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's around where the Oilers are picking,
around
there. Yeah, and in fact, they are picking at 19. You think Costa might be a good Oilers pick?
So I was actually talking to Ash Glover, who's a good friend of mine, who's also in the prospect scene and such. And we were just having a bit of fun. We were putting together a little mock draft, and we were talking about it, and we actually put Sebastian Costa as the Oilers pick in our mock draft. And he plays right there in Edmonton for the Oil Kings. And I think you look at some of what the Oilers could use on that team. They obviously have offense, covered with the guys like Connor and Leon. They've invested some high draft capital in defensemen with Bouchard and Broberg in recent years. And what they could really use is that elite high end goaltender. And Sebastian Costa, I was looking at him recently, and I think his past 2 years in the WHL, I think he's only lost 7 games in regulation.
He's got ridiculous numbers.
Yeah, he's insane. He's a big netminder, 6'6". I think he's got all the components to, at minimum, be a strong starting goaltender, if not an upper echelon starting goaltender in the NHL. He's someone that the more I've watched this year, he's just as steady as they come. And I think he absolutely has what it takes to become a starting goaltender for the Oilers if they chose him at that slot.
So as the year progressed for you in terms of the top prospects that in that first round sort of area, maybe up to the top 40, who maybe has dropped the most for you that you've seen, and who's surprised you the most?
I would say one of my bigger, droppers would probably be I would say Carson Lambos maybe, and he's still someone that I rate fairly highly. I still rate him as a first rounder, but at the start of my process this year, he was someone I was looking at as more of a top 5 type, and because I think in years past what you saw with Lambos was a really well-rounded toolkit where he can move the puck, he can play physical, he's good in his own zone, and I think some of the draw with him was he's already so solid at such a young age. Imagine if he adds just like one high-end tool to his game. And I was expecting this year to see him come in and maybe add some more punch in his mobility or some extra creativity in his offensive game. And I feel as though I just didn't quite see that. And at this moment, I see just a solid, maybe number 3, number 4 defenseman in the NHL level, and not that potential top pairing guy that I saw maybe a year ago. So he's someone that I would rate maybe more towards the 20s rather than the top 5 or top 10 pick. And then I would say my biggest riser would probably be Jack Pierre, who's a defenseman who played for the Fargo Force in the USHL and also spent some time in high school in Minnesota this year. He's someone he's just such a fluid and mobile puck mover. I was able to sit in on an interview with him before the BioSteel All-American game, and he was asked roughly what kind of NHL player he models himself afterwards, and he said that his guy growing up was always Duncan Keith. And I think you can see a lot of Duncan Keith in his game where he may not be the most skilled player out there, but he's such an intelligent puck mover. He thinks the offensive game really well, can play both ends of the ice, willing to play physical, even though he's not overly big. And I think he's someone that it's possible he doesn't go in round 1 on draft night, but I think he's absolutely worth a look in the top 25.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I've heard the name, and I think I've seen him anywhere top round to middle of the second round, right? But definitely in the top 2 somewhere. One of the things I'm always kind of curious about, because obviously the conversation around whether kids go and play NCAA or they play junior hockey in Canada. Was there a league this year that was the benefactor of the way things went, or was there one league that came out sort of the victor this year in terms of prospects that you noticed? Or I mean, I'm asking you. I'm not. It's not something that I prepped you for. So, but any specific league that you think was really strong?
I think because of
All right, sorry everybody.
Recording in progress.
We'll be back on here.